And you see Carol, Larissa and Alex. So let me just introduce them all. Alex, first of all, she's the research team leader at Ashurst, a private law firm, and indeed, as I said earlier, president of the Australian Law Librarians Association. And she's also editor of the Australian Law Librarian Journal. So unless you count babysitting, she says, which she doesn't do, she's only ever worked in libraries and research. So there we go, that's Alex. And research and information design are where her passions lie. And she's been involved, as I know very well, with the QUT legal research course as a mentor ever since it went online. So she's one of our aficionados and contributes fantastically to the course, as does Larissa. And Larissa Reid, she's a law librarian and has been so for 15 years and works at the Law Courts Library in Sydney. So that's the Supreme Court, the Federal Court with New South Wales judges, the Land and Environment Court, the District Court, the Local Court, and the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal, and much, much more. So again, if you just reflect on what we've just talked about with the different areas of law, the different sort of levels of government on the different sort of state side, etc., there's a lot of interest in there for whoever might like to interview Larissa to talk about. Her main responsibilities are reference and research, training and intranet design. And prior to the role with the courts, she worked at the City Literary Institute in London and at the New South Wales Bar Association Library. So that's with barristers as opposed to solicitors, so a different angle again. And then Larissa loves legal history, so here's another person to talk to, legislation, and also helping new law librarians. So she's a wonderful mentor in our program as well. And Carol's, as we have heard, she's at the University of Melbourne with the Law Library and has been there since 2008. Prior to that, she was at the Ohio State University, Moritz Law Library, as Associate Director as well. She's Chair of the Programme Committee for the 2016 ALA Conference, which is presumably in Melbourne, and she's convener of the Australian New Zealand Academic and College Law Librarians Group. And she's written and presented on a variety of law library topics during her career in law librarianship. And we met up in Columbus, Ohio in August at the IFLA conference. We sort of made contact there. So thank you all three for your time and the contribution that you make to the course. We really, really, really appreciate it. So first of all, because what we want to do is find out how you came to be in all your different roles, I'd like you all to sort of consider how you got into law librarianship. What was the driving factor that made it so interesting, or did you just fall into it? Alex, can I start with you, please?
Yeah, no problem, Stu. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So for me, going into law librarianship was a lot about curiosity. So I actually started looking at the law whilst I was working at KPMG in the tax knowledge management team. I was monitoring and reporting on case law and legislation that was relevant to tax and the Australian tax team and our 200 plus external clients who were receiving a daily newsletter. And what I basically wanted to do was really just accelerate my knowledge and understanding of the law. And so I started, I actually enrolled in a postgraduate law degree and enjoying that degree so much that I then went, like when a role came up at Ashurst, I took it and have enjoyed the opportunity to have a total immersion in legal research.
Oh, that's great. Actually, I sort of went the same path as well. I started out with Coopers and Lybrand in tax and insolvency law and sort of moved more broadly into some of the private practice in the legal sector that way as well. So very good to hear.
Because every time I talk to someone and say, yeah, tax law is actually really interesting, they sort of look at me funny. So I think you'd get it.
Yes, indeed. No, yes, there's neighbours of ours here, and I think one of their relatives was in a major tax case. You know, every time I see the name, I'm like, oh, you know, that was that case. You know, so you know these people. So, Larissa, did you have a similar journey, or did you come from a different angle?
Oh, mine was completely different. Can you hear me?
Yes, yep, absolutely.
Great. So I
used
to be in sort of a social work area. I worked for Lifeline, I did counselling, and I ran a shop. And I missed my arts degree. I missed all the sort of intellectual stimulation of that. And I just had this thought one day of being a librarian would combine both helping people and the intellectual stimulation. So I did the library degree with no particular area of librarianship in mind, just I wanted to help people and be interested in what I did. And so then I just got my degree and then started looking around for work. And I applied for, you know, public libraries and school libraries and all sorts of things. But I had an interview at the Bar Association. And it just so happened that the manager there had a really strong belief in hiring new graduates so that she could train them the way that she wanted to. And so I went to that interview, and I sort of fell in love with the library when I walked through the door. It was one of those sort of old school legal history bookish kind of libraries at that time. It's not now, it's been massively renovated, but at that time there was all this dark timber and all these rows of beautiful law reports, and I just thought, oh wow, this is really cool. And so I had one interview and came away thinking, I really want this job, this would be fantastic for me, I can just sense it. And then I just happened to have a best friend who had done a law degree, and so I rang her up, and she just told me for 3 hours solid everything she knew about the legal system and legal research and everything I could sort of fit into a 3-hour conversation. And then I went back and had a second interview, and I got the job. And I just loved it, and I've loved it ever since. That was sort of really luck more than anything.
Not quite luck, but yeah, obviously the aptitude that was recognised that was good. And obviously you took the strategies to find out how to learn more very, very quickly, to be able to get through that interview as well. So I think not just luck, there's a lot of strategy in there as well, I think, somehow. So, Carol, I'm sure your story is quite different. What's your take? Do we have Carol? Have you got the microphone, Carol? Or have we lost Carol? Actually, looking at the list of people, no, she's down there. No, she's dropped out from the...
Okay. Hello?
Yes, hello. You are.
Okay,
great.
Now you can hear me.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you, and we just want to know how you got into the field.
All right. I had completed my arts law degree many years ago, and I completed my articles and was going to stay on a Melbourne law firm. And I decided to get married and leave the country a few months. The day after I got married, we left the country to go live in the United States because my husband wanted to do further study. And I got to the United States, and back in those days, getting a work visa was quite difficult. And when I arrived at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, they had a program for spouses of graduate students. And they suggested that I go along to the foreign students office to find out about the program, because they realized that there were a lot of, professional couples that would come to University of Wisconsin-Madison where one partner was studying and the other one wasn't able to work because of the visa, the complications of trying to get a visa. That was very difficult. So they set up a program, sort of a volunteer internship program, where people would be matched with professionals in the area to sort of volunteer or perhaps, stay in touch with people who had their profession, that type of thing. And when I turned up, somebody in the office said, well, we know this justice at the Supreme Court, the Wisconsin Supreme Court up the road. let's go and have a chat to her. So I went off to meet her. I went up to the court and I met her and we chatted. And she said, well, I'm sure you could be useful, but you don't really know much about American law, do you? And I said, well, no, I really don't know much about American law. And she said, well, that's okay. So she picked up the phone and called up the director of the University of Wisconsin Law Library and arranged that I go down there the next morning. So I went down there and met a woman called Anita Morse, and she said, well, yeah, this is easy. We've got first year JD students starting. Why don't you sit in on their legal research classes every week? And perhaps when you get done with that, you can go back to the court, and I'm sure, that Justice Shirley Abramson will, find a bit of a project you can help with, because after all, by that point, you'll have some good skills. So I did that during the semester, and I was sort of thinking about what I wanted to do. Before I'd left Australia, I was thinking, well, law practice is okay, but I can't see myself doing this long term. So I'd sort of been having a bit of a think about options. But when I arrived at University of Wisconsin Law School Library, I discovered that even many years ago, there was sort of a general expectation that reference librarians in that law library had both a library degree, a master's degree in, library information science studies, whatever you want to call it, and a JD or, a professional degree to practice law. So that got me thinking, and between encouragement from the Justice of the Supreme Court, Shirley Abramson, and Anita Morse, it wasn't too long before I got enrolled into the library school program, and I was hired as a research assistant type person in the law school and for the library director, and basically I just did my course over about 2.5 years because there wasn't much incentive to get finished, because Madison was a place where there weren't a whole lot of job opportunities because, university town. So anyway, I had a very interesting start and really enjoyed learning a lot about legal research.
Okay, and then you ended up back in Australia again in the end.
Well, coming back to Australia happened 23 years later, so
wow, so long
very
time.
much later. But it did really make me think, because obviously I've lived and worked in the United States for 23 years. I've been back in Australia for 9 years, but it made me realise that this is a fantastic degree to have. It can be a very portable degree in many ways.
That's great. Good. Thank you very much indeed. So let's just go to Larissa in your role. What are your responsibilities in the broader sense of a law librarian, but also very specifically in this legal research arena as well?
I'm in the client services area. So I do a lot of reference gestureships and legal research, but also a lot of training. It's one thing that we're really working on at the moment is helping all of the judicial officers to get used to using iPads, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of training of individual judicial officers. So we go out to chambers and we talk them through how to use a particular ebook app, that kind of thing. And also intranet design. So that's always a massive thing to keep to keep an intranet up to date and relevant. And so there's a lot of those kind of things. And I also quite recently have been acting up in different management roles as well. So I've been learning a bit more about technical services and about invoices and procurement and book selection, that kind of thing as well.
It's quite a broad range. So how many people actually work at the Law Courts Library?
About 24.
Okay. Yeah, so it's quite a special library, inverted commas, that's quite a large staff.
It is.
That's interesting. So Alex, what about you? How could you describe, so that's, Larissa's in the courts. Alex, at your law firm, what are your main responsibilities?
Well, I've only recently become the research team leader. at Ashurst. So I'm at the moment responsible for the day-to-day management of research, such as rosters, providing support to the research team, managing requests and everyone's capacity and so forth. I'm also responsible for driving the strategic direction of the research team and the research service. So at the moment I'm really focused on profiling the skills of the research team and making sure that we have a seat at the table. So really bringing us out of, I think as a corporate librarian, I think I have a love-hate and predominantly hate relationship with the notion of library, because it's a lot of, there's a lot of preconceptions that come with that, and they don't fit the modern research team. And so it's really about profiling the skills of our team. And so I've been working a lot to profile our research team and the skills we have with our innovation agenda. Now, if you've had a look at anything to do with law firms, innovation is a really big deal. And so what we've been doing is really trying to, we've actually ended up putting our e-learning platform as an innovative publication platform. And so that was put forward and sort of cross-purposing all of what we do, our information design skills, our analytical skills and our research skills, and making sure that they are in every possible element of the firm. And because you have a firm where there's a lot of time pressures, like every single lawyer has to charge 7.5 hours a day, which doesn't leave a lot of time for innovation and a lot of time for thinking outside the box. And so we have to do a lot of promotion and and making sure that everyone knows what our skills are and what we can do. So that's what really I do within the team.
That's a really good take. I mean, a lot of the research I do is obviously around sort of skills across the sector and things like that. So that's really insightful to know that you're involved in that sort of work as well. So it's my personal take. I do some work with ISLA as well, and they always talk about what libraries can do. But libraries are like buildings or collections. They do nothing. It's the librarians. It's the people who work, and it's the skills and the abilities and capabilities that they have that is so critical, and they remain under the radar so often. So to articulate those and really make them very clear is critical, I think. And I know the other course I'm running at the moment is Research Support Services. So again, innovation and the skill sets of librarians in that space is also very important. So I think you're riding with the opportunity for people to see libraries as quite different. So thank you for that.
I think it sounds really lame, but I do have over my cubicle or my desk area a sign that says "Bringing the right skills to the table." And that's really what I want to do, is look at the life cycle of a matter, look at the life cycle of work within the firm and embed the researcher in each of those elements.
That's fantastic. Good for you. Yeah, I look forward to some further conversations offline around this. That's good. And let's move to Carol, because I'm sure your environment is quite different at the University of Melbourne. How could you sort of explain your main responsibilities?
Okay. I am one of, I think, 8 discipline librarians here at the University of Melbourne. And the law library is placed within the law school, which is great. So obviously I have sort of administrative type responsibilities with my fellow discipline librarians, so that at the moment we're working on projects to sort of progress more digital learning objects, but at the same time making sure that they're, have a consistent professional look, and that the librarians are being sort of trained and adding skills to be able to work in the sort of digital learning space in the best sort of possible manner. So there's been lots of professional development in that area, and then of course research support is a very important part of what liaison librarians do at the University of Melbourne. Obviously, University of Melbourne has very high rankings, #1 in Australia, and lots of rankings, and is very research focused. And so support needs to be provided in lots of ways. It may be we have interest in research data management. There's open access. We have a digital repository. We're all talking about big data and the role that research librarians can have in working with faculty and researchers in, working with data sets, capturing them, making them available to someone at a later point in time. Lots of issues related to that. And obviously the learning and teaching, we have a new scholarly literacy strategy and framework which has been revised to emphasise the importance of digital literacy. So we'll be doing sort of a rollout of that, and we're thinking of ways to sort of get students engaged and thinking about things like their digital footprint, and using technology in sort of ethical and appropriate manners, and privacy issues, and all the things that come about. So it's there's a real mixed bag of larger issues that we are all tackling with great enthusiasm at the moment. But of course, I'm also considered a member of the law school's senior professional staff management team. So there are fellow managers here in the law school, and I obviously have to work with the research office manager and the communications, events, advancement people, and the people who manage the student interface, all the administration for students. So I have sort of home responsibilities that in my building to do with sort of understanding our clientele and their needs. And then I obviously have things that are thought as much more of sort of library functions. And obviously the collection is a really big part of what I do, because law materials, especially some of the electronic subscriptions, they work differently to some of the subscriptions, and some of our collection issues are a bit different to some of the other disciplines. So I spend a lot of time making sure we have the best, most appropriate collection.
Right. So in terms
lots of interdisciplinarities thrown in as well.
Yeah, that's right. So your clients, if you like, you've got, being in an academic library, you've got your students, so like undergraduate students, then you've got your higher degree research students presumably, and then you've got your academics as well.
Well, the academics obviously, they're very important, and they have very specialised sort of high level research needs. Our students are interesting in that we no longer teach the LLB, so we do not have undergraduate law students obtaining an LLB.
That's the Melbourne model that you're referring to.
Yeah, they now call them Melbourne degrees. You have your undergraduate degrees, and we now have the JD program, and that's like all the other professional schools here at University of Melbourne, whether you're a dentist, a nurse, a physiotherapist, a doctor, a veterinarian, etc. But we do teach what we call undergraduate law breadth subjects. So occasionally we might get an engineering student who does a subject to do with social media, privacy in the law, that type of thing. So we have a number of undergraduate subjects where the law librarians may go in to explain or do a workshop on some legal research skills that the students need to be able to complete the assessment that they have in those particular subjects. And then, of course, we have the JD students who are qualifying to practice law at the end of their 3-year degree. And then we have a very large Melbourne Law Masters program. We have gosh, in excess of 1,200 part-time Melbourne Law Master students, probably another 140 full-time, and they are often writing research essays, getting ready for take-home exams, so they have to do their research very quickly. And then we have law PhD students as well. So we have quite diverse communities.
Indeed. Okay, let me move across to Larissa now as well. In that case, I'm sure your clients are quite different from the group that Carol has, or multiple groups that Carol has outlined.
Yeah,
what are your clients like?
Our clients are predominantly judges and magistrates. We also look after some staff of the Department of Justice as well, but our primary focus is judges and magistrates. And as you were saying in the introduction, because we look after so many courts, federal and state courts, we've just got this enormous breadth of subject materials that we need to sort of have access to and be across. Now, one of the biggest differences is between the different levels of courts. So if you're a magistrate, it's just you and the court. You don't have any staff, and you could be dealing with 50 or 60 matters a day. So for those clients, they will just fire off a question, and we just have to send whatever it is that they need and just get it back to them quickly. And the higher up you go, sort of the more complex the research tasks can be. So you might have a Court of Appeal matter that's a very, very fine point of law, and it might be quite a complex thing that might take you all day to research. And in those situations, you've got a judge who has an associate and a tip staff, they're called, which is like a law graduate who spends a year with the judge. And so with those clients, it's much more of a sort of a partnership where you're working with the tip staff to work through the project, and you do some research and send it to them now, feedback if that's the right thing, and you work with them to work on their own strategies as well. So it's a really, really different kind of model. So you've got those sort of legal research questions, but we also have to do a lot of research for speeches. The judges give speeches all over the place, and so you can be dealing with almost any area of law. Sometimes you've got a judge. We had one going to Pakistan to go to a conference. We had to research Pakistani law so that he could speak about their legal system. So there's that kind of thing. And often there's a lot of research about the history of the court. So, at the moment we're sort of digging out every judge who was ever the Chief Judge in Equity, that kind of thing, so that someone can write a paper or a book about the history of the court. So there's those kinds of things. Another aspect that I think is quite different to some of the other areas is that we're almost always looking at law as it was in the past, because if a matter comes before the court, you're litigating something that happened in the past, so you often have to find out what the law was at that time. And then you also get judges who want to understand how that law developed. So we might trace, I think Alex will be familiar with this as well, probably Carol too, that you get a corporations law question, you need to trace it back. Where did this provision first come in? So you go back from the Corporations Act, the Corporations Law, to the Companies Code, to the Uniform Companies Act before that, to individual state acts, and then back to the UK. This sort of they
are the best questions.
Yeah,
I love those questions.
Me too. We've got a flow chart of legislation at different points in time. So if you haven't done it before, you can, without having to figure it out yourself, just track these things back. But we do that kind of research a lot, and judges will want to look at all the extrinsic materials that you'll hear about later in the course. So if the law is made, they want to understand what Parliament said about it at the time, so they'll look at the Hansard, they'll look at the explanatory materials that came with it, because their job is to interpret what that law means, what the words mean. So they'll obviously look at the text of the Act, but they'll also look at these extrinsic materials. So we're getting those out all the time as well. So it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, I can see why you're addicted to the whole thing. So Alex, your clients are probably slightly different again.
Yeah, my clients are really, unofficially, it's global, but officially it's the Asia Pacific region. So the only thing I can say about our clients is that it's never safe to assume. We've been a national team for about 3 years and supporting the entire Asia Pacific region. So this is Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore, Jakarta, Papua New Guinea, And so one minute you can be on a call with a Canberra lawyer and the next minute you're on talking to someone in Hong Kong. And we've got the infrastructure in place within the firm so that all of this is possible and seamless, and you don't really realise until you sort of look in people directory and say, okay, yes, that person is in fact in another jurisdiction. And so as it's really a struggle often, and I take it back, not so much a struggle that makes it all exciting, and you have to be knowledgeable in all jurisdictions. So not just in Australia, but have the skills to locate resources in everywhere, from China, Kazakhstan to the moon. And I'm not joking about the moon, we have legitimately been asked about that. And very, very seriously. And we really have to be ready for anything. And because the firm is a corporate firm, so we're testing the boundaries of the law. So 9 times out of 10, you're never going to get an answer to the question that's there. We just need to try and fill the gap as much as possible to present that argument to the courts so that Larissa's judges can deliberate and hopefully agree with us. So we're really testing the boundaries, and I'm a Star Trek nerd, so I like to think that we're boldly going where no researcher has gone before. But that's just
scaffolding, I suppose, for those who don't know much about law firms, obviously you've got sort of, it's a partnership, so you've got partners at the top who sort of have the ownership of the organisation, and then there's obviously different layers of expertise as you come down, but then you also have that sort of growing body of article clerks and new people coming into the firm. So you're sort of covering all of that range of legal experience as well?
Yeah. So we've got people who know exactly what they want, generally at that partner level, or they also utilise us because we're more efficient. We're dedicated on the research. We're not going to be like a graduate is potentially going to be pulled 12 different ways by different lawyers, different senior associates and stuff like that. When you get a request or a partner calling you up and saying, hey, can you come up to my office to talk about this question, then generally you sort of block out the rest of your day because, you know, I'm going to be working on a multi-million or often billion-dollar matter, and this is what I'm going to do. And we aren't anonymous. We do end up on the client bill as charge time, and so we're really a value add for the service. We also provide research services to external clients. So we're often receiving research requests from in-house counsel from all of our CLE clients, and need to make sure that we provide spot-on research for them. Of course, we're also going to be aiming to providing spot-on research to internally, but also we're serving as the most recent experience the firm has had, that they've had with the firm.
Yes, and that is then billable, so you're actually raising revenue for the firm as well.
Yes.
So that's quite different from Carol and Larissa. Presumably they don't have to worry about that financial angle of it. Conceivably.
Like, we're not held accountable like the lawyers are, but we do bill our time.
Sure. Great. Thank you very much indeed. So, we've sort of been talking a little bit about skills earlier, but let's try and contextualise this within the legal research rather than the broader management sort of side of things, but just the legal research side. What skills do you feel you've had to apply? What have you sort of brought with you? What is, I suppose, trends that are happening that you're developing new skills? I say not just very, very broadly, but particularly for legal research. Well, so what's the perspective that you could have? Let's go back to Larissa, possibly. Okay, for in the court environment, what are your key skills and emerging skill sets?
So in terms of legal research, I've just found that really thorough knowledge of legislation has just been critical. A lot of the court staff come out of law school and they're pretty good at finding cases, or Alex might disagree, I don't know, but they seem to be really good at that. But legislation, they haven't had to find historical legislation as much, and so we spend a lot of time guiding them through that process, and judges don't always have time to do all the fiddly piecing together of a legislative history, and they'll want us to do it. The Chief Justice of the Federal Court once said to me that he thought that kind of work was just ideal for a librarian, because we had all the skills, we could do it quickly and accurately, and we could save their time enormously. And so we focus a lot on building up legislation skills particularly. I've also
Which is interesting when you actually, I mean, my assumption, or somebody else's assumption could be, well, it's about the courts, therefore it's actually about case law, that would be a priority. But of course, case law interprets legislation, and so therefore that's an important
all the time.
Yeah.
I've also found it really useful just to have the best possible knowledge of the sources that are available to me. I mean, when you build the intranet, you're sort of having to really drill through all your products and work out everything you've got access to and arrange it in a useful manner for your client. So that helps develop your knowledge of online skills. But because a lot of the work that the court does is historical, I've had to really, really build up my knowledge of the historical resources, which necessarily they aren't all online. So I really focus on knowing that collection backwards. And you get all these questions where you only can really find the answer because you've done a lot of reading in the past. If you know what's in Blackson's commentaries, you can go back to it and have more hope of finding it. Sometimes it wouldn't, you wouldn't necessarily think it would be in a source, but you've read it before and okay, I can go there and I know the answer's going to be in there.
It's a lot of cumulative knowledge building that you're doing all the time.
Yeah, there really is. And I belong to the Forbes Society for Australian Legal History. So I go along to legal history lectures and I just learn so much from those. And that just pays off all the time. So legal research goes like that. Also, just being able to construct a good search and thinking laterally, not being afraid to rerun searches over and over again until you've got the perfect terms. In the old days when I first started, you had to sort of pay per search, so you'd spend all this time agonizing at the start, building up this sort of perfect Boolean string, and panic, really stressful. But now you can just refine your search. So you run something, see if that's working or not, and then you refine from there.
Yeah.
And just sort of having the confidence to do that. And I also, we say this all the time to our tippies, to our court staff. If you're not sure about the area of law, start with a secondary source, so an encyclopedia or a textbook or something like that, so that you can understand what search terms to use. So you don't just want to plug in the words that the judge said to you. You want to understand, which I've seen it happen. So you need to understand a bit more about the area of law first. So those kinds of skills. But in terms of emerging skills, it's really just the technology. So the platforms are developing all the time, the ebook things that are coming out and improving, and we need to stay on top of it. What we want to do in our library is position ourselves as the tech experts. We've got an IT department, but they're not specialised in the legal research software products that we are. So we want to be the people that magistrates and judges ring if they're stuck with a problem with their iPad and they can't get onto an app. We want to be the team of experts. So we're focusing a lot on building up those skills. And so there's just that. And also, I just think training. Training has grown enormously in the time I've been a librarian. I didn't learn anything about running a training session in my degree, but that's been another massive area of growth. So I advise everyone to learn about that, because it's not always running a formal training session. Sometimes it's just showing someone how to use a product or run a search just at the point that they need it. So just breaking it down to the thing that they need to know at that point to accomplish their goal, but in such a way that they could apply it to their next question. They could learn something in the process sometimes.
Right.
So those kind of skills.
That's great. That gives a really good perspective of those different range of things. So how about you, Carol? What skills, not in your managerial role, but maybe if you're not doing so much directly, what skills do you see in your staff that they need in the research, legal research area?
Oh, just, you know, we've talked about curiosity, we've talked about you know, historical legal materials, and it's just about how when you immerse yourself and read more about different areas of law, you're just familiar with the language of law, and it does help you construct better searches. We just can't make the assumption that search engines, databases are so smart that they can kind of figure out and divine through the air what we really need. I mean, we've really got to think carefully about the searches and knowing the features of the databases we use. So they're definitely skills that there's a lot of emphasis on developing. Presentation skills, I think there's a lot more emphasis on doing engaging presentations, engaging workshops, working with students. Sort of, we do a lot of one-on-one consultations, especially with PhD, Masters, JD students. And it's really not just sort of the old-fashioned, you know, the librarian as the expert. You sit there and you type everything into the computer and they sit there and take a few notes and nod occasionally. You keep sort of telling them. I think a lot of effective learning is about, you know, oftentimes I'll have the student there, they bring their laptop and I kind of coach and guide and prompt them so that they're sort of actively participating. I mean, obviously we've done things like experiment in the classroom with, you know, polling apps and things like that. We're all the time trying to think about improving how we get students to master some of these skills. And it's quite challenging sometimes because what students do to do an 8,000, 10,000 word essay is not always quite the same as what they do in legal practice. So often there's a lot of the things they have to do in law school. It's really scholarly information literacy. It's scholarly legal research in some cases, and it's not sort of the much more practical, hey, time is of the essence here. Do you really know how much it costs to run, you know, silly searches in an expensive legal database which has an arrangement of, you know, charging by the minute, charging by parts of the database that you access. So there's a lot of time.
Quite nicely into Alex afterwards as well. So
yeah, well, we're focused on certain things that the students need. And students are very engaged when it's all about assessment. It's a little bit harder to sort of say, oh, look, when you graduate in a couple of years, this is a few tips that you might want to keep in mind. I mean, the students can't think past next week at this time of the year. They're very focused on exams and getting through the semester. So all the time we're sort of thinking about, well, how are we going to do things with apps for students? We're all the time trying to think, how do we get their attention? How do we help them learn these skills? How do we help them be self-sufficient? I mean, our law library has over 50 of the you know, we use that LibGuide software. We try to point out the best of the free and the subscription databases. We try not to be too wordy. We just try to have it. We try to instill that there's no point in reinventing the wheel on legal research. If there's lots of good, smart librarians in academic libraries, courts, etc., that have done research guides on a jurisdiction. You know, you can use a few research guides in conjunction to get to the best sources, understand where the best translation may be for a particular jurisdiction which doesn't have English as the sort of language of the laws are written in. So all the time we're trying to sort of improve the self-service aspect.
So from your skills that are required there, so that's really good. So maybe I suppose back to Alex then, you're the recipient of graduates. they come to you. But let's try and still stay on the skills, because obviously that's a real focus that you're interested in at the moment, in terms of showcasing and explaining and articulating the skill sets of library and information professionals in the legal research environment. So what are you doing in that space?
Well, the skills that we portray between each of the different, the skills we provide and sort of utilise, really, so that's the word I was looking for, depends on where the individual sits within the firm. So when they're the seasonal clerk, the paralegal, the graduate, that's where we're utilising our training. Because whilst we give them a formalised training, it really only sinks in when it's on the job type stuff. It's like, okay, now I actually need to learn how to backtrack this legislation. I actually need to learn how to formulate my search strategy in the US so that I can work out what's going on in this particular area. And then for the lawyer and up level, we're more about conducting the best research interview and playing devil's advocate, because it often helps to widen the cone of sight with practitioners, and when they're looking at concepts, they're often looking at it within the cone of what the client has told them, and then potentially what they've been delegated by a senior lawyer, and they're sort of looking at it like that. And because we're impartial, we often just talk to them and talk out a question and provide that type of, okay, I will find you things on both sides of the argument, or I haven't found anything that supports your argument, but I have found research that supports the other side. So really, for
balance.
Yeah, well, we really have to be balanced, because you have to also think about it on a practitioner's side. They want to know if there's going to be something that the other side is going to put forward.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so we really have to keep an open mind as much as possible. And this is really tough when you've got people sort of saying, I need absolutely every piece of judicial consideration of the Competition and this section of the Competition and Consumer Act, and subsequently the Trade Practitioners Act. So you're looking at stuff from the 1970s onwards within the next 20 minutes. And so you're really, I think, for us, the research skills are about staying focused, breathing, and the reference interview.
Great. No, that's really good.
And not freaking out.
Yeah, not freaking out. Yes, that's absolutely right. Okay, just to pull things together and wrap it up, perhaps, we've got all of our prospective aspiring law librarians out there. What advice would you give them? Probably just a couple of sentences that you might sort of be able to wrap up those things. Carol, can you just very concisely say?
Yes, I would really advise all of you to, obviously, if you'd love to be a law librarian, join Australian Law Libraries Association. It's a wonderful way to meet people, to get advice, and to get experience in contributing to a professional organisation. I just think it's a tremendous value to help you learn about different types of law librarianship and give you opportunities, administrative opportunities, or all sorts of opportunities that can really serve you well in being a successful law librarian. So I would really say get involved in professional library organisations sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. And you have your conference so that you can...
Well, yes, we had our conference, and it's just, they're great professional development opportunities
for networking. That's right. So if you notice just on our screen, we're sort of saying it's about research skills, about professional development, it's about networking. So I think you've exactly sort of pulled those sort of key ideas that we're trying to achieve through this course into that. That's really good.
And it's about ideas and opportunities to present. There's just so many good things that law librarians can get out of being professionally active.
Excellent. Great, thank you. Thank you. That's some good advice there. Larissa, you're a younger practitioner. What would you recommend? Are we there? Larissa there? What is the problem? Okay, maybe I'll just pass over to Alex at that point. There must be sorry about that. I know Larissa's back on board. Sorry,
back on.
Okay. Go back to Larissa.
Okay. I just would wholeheartedly second Carol's recommendation to join the Australian Law Librarians Association. It's just absolutely the best way to get involved with other law librarians, to hear about different opportunities and to practice different skills. It's just the best. I'd also really recommend just using Twitter. You can follow conferences, you can just find out about developments in the legal world, the legal research world. There are so many wonderful librarians who are just sharing their knowledge all the time, posting links to things to read, live tweeting through Alice sessions or conferences, that kind of thing. It's become my main source of current awareness, and it's also helped me to build connections with librarians, in other countries as well. So we tweet things to each other, and I've been able to, get assistance with, French legal research because of the connection that I met on Twitter, that kind of thing.
So probably again offline we sort of should capture some of the good places to follow and sort of know the key sources and things like that. So I might touch base with you with that so that we can put together a bit of a resource kit.
Absolutely. And also just read as much as you can. So many things to read, but just understand the different sources. Read the newspaper with an eye to understanding the matters in the courts at the moment, things before Parliament, that kind of thing, just building up a current awareness kind of eye.
Yes. I can remember being chastised once when I was with Coopers in Library, admittedly, but somebody said, she just reads the paper. Like, yes, she reads the paper because she answers your queries. She knows exactly what's going on. So yes, keeping up to date with things is really, really important to have a vibe, and therefore, being proactive to push things out to the clients who know, when you know what they're working on, that you can sort of point them in the right direction of where the new developments are happening as well. So that's good. Great. So let's just turn over to Alex as president of this esteemed association.
And entirely unbiased.
Totally.
So everyone join ALA, thank you. No, but really just echoing everything that Carol and Marissa said, network as much as you can. Partly because also you can learn so much from everyone within the association and within the profession, but also, on the bottom line, they can also help you find a job.
That's a really good point to raise, I think. Yes, that it is very often who you know, and if there is that opportunity to interact with people through your career, then those open up new opportunities as well. So hence, dare I say, the motivation for the first assignment or learning activity, which is to get out there and make contact and start finding out what's going on. So that's all great. Let's just open up very quickly. Any questions from our participants? We've got these three really interesting, experienced people in the virtual room at the moment. So take this opportunity to ask questions if you have them, or comments, feedback. Yes, Maria, you've got something?
Yes.
Do you want to yes.
Just curious, and maybe just briefly, because we're seeing the emergence of new type of law, cybercrime law, cyber law. Has any one of you have had experience researching on that, and what is it like?
Okay, so emerging areas of law, so like cyber law. Is anybody working in that field? Maybe Alex, you might be, or you just had a technical problem, I think. You there?
Sorry, I lost for a technical problem there at the end. So looking at emerging areas of law.
Yeah, so specifically like, Maria, what were you saying, cyber law specifically? Is that an area that Asha works in?
Something to do with the, internet.
So we look at blockchain a lot. Blockchain. So that's the more generalistic version of Bitcoin. So it's basically going to revolutionize large transactions. So a lot of the banks are going in that space, just so that then they don't actually have to employ intermediaries to help them move billions of dollars, because they've got this authoritative record. But then with that type of innovation, you've also got issues of authenticity and also the fact that the law is dragging behind a lot of this stuff. So you're actually increasingly going towards what you'd regard as less authoritative version, like less authoritative sources of information, because the world is moving so quickly, and the time it takes to become an expert in a particular area has dropped exponentially, particularly when it's an emerging area of law, because you have to jump on it straight away, and that's where, and I guess if you're a bit more of a traditionalist, you'd probably scoff, but Twitter is a particularly effective way of monitoring for different developments, because people use consistent hashtags because they want to have the impact in what they're saying.
So just new media to track new developments and things like that. So
exactly. LinkedIn is integral in that as well, because people are profiling themselves as an information product and an expertise.
True.
That's so interesting. Thank you, Alex.
Great. Thank you, Maria, too. Yeah. Anybody else? Have you got some queries?
No, else? I just wanted to say that obviously with new emerging areas of law, you try to be a little bit proactive to make sure that you do have resources available. So we're always kind of keeping an eye on, what should we get, and how do we pick the very best type of publications, the type of books that do appear on the scene. Because as an academic library, we're a research library, and there's a lot of issues to do with how tweets and blogs and websites and email and all sorts of digital media will be preserved into the future. I mean, that's a really fascinating area at the moment, and we still have a responsibility as a research library to sort of make sure we have some good old-fashioned print books or e-books or whatever that we're committed to sort of take on, making available into the future. So that's just something that we think about.
You've drawn a really interesting point that, Larissa, you're also doing a lot of this really, really historical stuff, yet, boundaries are being pushed at the sort of cutting edge as well. So you're covering centuries, literally, of history and development. So it's really exciting, I think, from that perspective, that it's not static, even though most people think that it's all about the old books or something. But that's really good. So, great. Well, we filled in our time very productively, I think. I hope that all the participants have enjoyed the opportunity to meet with Carol, Larissa and Alex, and I'm sure it's not the last that we'll see of them during the course. And we, again, the conversation goes beyond the actual classroom of the 2 hours that we're here. So don't forget, you can continue to contribute through Facebook, or you've got the contact details. You can contact these people as well directly. So from my side, thank you very much indeed, Carol, Larissa and Alex, for the contribution you've made tonight. And we'll stay in touch over the next few weeks and make sure that we have more opportunities to draw you in, and obviously the fact that we're doing this in partnership with the Australian Law Librarians Association makes it so valuable as well. So that's great. So thank you all very much. And
thank you.
That's good. So, and I think some lovely comments coming through in the chat, so that you are really appreciated for the time that you've been able to give us. So we'll say goodbye to everybody, and we'll continue. Plenty that you can do if you look at the Blackboard site, and we'll give you a message tomorrow around the best way to move forward over the next few days. So thanks everybody, and good night from me, good night from you, and all of that sort of stuff, and we'll see you next week.